me is diametrically opposed to the founding principles of the U.S. Constitution because it basically destroys your private property rights and takes your liberty away from you and puts it in the hand of bureaucrats. Okay, global warming, facts and myths. I'm going to go through this pretty fast. You've all heard about global warming and the polar bears. The polar bear population, by the way, is the highest it's ever been since they started taking it back in the early 1970s. They're not endangered. Even though they've been declared endangered, they're not endangered. They're thriving. Of course, you've seen all kinds of, well, maybe you haven't, but there's been all kinds of publications on this issue. But let's just take a look at the history of warming here on planet Earth. If you go back from the right-hand side back into time, what you find is that we're in a process of recovery. Our temperatures are getting warmer not because of man-caused global warming, because they're naturally recovering from what is called the Little Ice Age that happened back in the 1700s and 1800s. And folks, we're about to go into another one of those right now. We're in the process of converting from global warming to global cooling. How bad it's going to be remains to be seen. Back around 1200, it was a couple of degrees warmer. You hear all these talks about the fact that the Earth has never been warmer than it is right now. That's hogwash. In fact, if you go back to the Holocene optimums, it was 4 to 5 degrees warmer at that time than it is right now. This is nothing new. Antarctica didn't melt back in those days. Greenland, the ice cap did not melt. This is nothing new. Now, in the last 10 years, what we see is a lot of highly variable temperatures. Why are they highly variable? Because we're in a transition period from a warming cycle to a cooling cycle. And anytime you have a transition period, you know, in the springtime, all the tornadoes that happen and so forth, because you still have cold air moving down while warmer air is starting to push up. Well, the same thing happens on this massive scale as well. As you shift your actual processes from warming to cooling, it's going to go through a period of transition. But notice the general slope of the line. It's down. And of course, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases continue to skyrocket. It has nothing to do with global warming. In fact, Al Gore, how many have seen Inconvenient Truth? A smattering. How many are still in public schools? A smattering. I hope you talk a lot to your parents, because what you're getting in your public schools, a lot of it's nothing but propaganda. Keep in touch with you. Believe your parents, folks. Your parents know a lot more than those teachers do. So pay attention to them. They're not dumb, even though you've been told that they're dumb. Al Gore's group, or Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, was actually banned in England because it had, they listed, I think, 13 critical errors, when in fact it actually had 42 major errors, but they only listed 13 or so in the court decision. But they were so bad and so obnoxious that the court ruled that they could not be shown in the classrooms of England or Great Britain. Okay, now what is causing the warming, or why is the global warming models wrong? This is a compilation of about 20 global warming models. You see that at the equator, that there's warming in the upper atmosphere around the equator. If you go to the left, you're going to the north. If you're going to the south, you go to the right. So you're looking at latitude here and elevation here. At about between 6 to about 14 kilometers, which is about 5 miles to about 10 miles in elevation, there's this massive pool of warming according to the global warming models. Now there's a reason for that. The warming models depend on one factor. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. However, It's fully saturated already in our atmosphere. It can't hold back much more heat. It's just a matter of a little tiny bit, fraction. You're never told that. Most of your scientists, in fact, almost all scientists that are working on climatology understand this. That it's not carbon dioxide that's causing the warming. Carbon dioxide is merely a catalyst. There's enough residual amplitude within carbon dioxide, its heat energy, to absorb some more heat. Not much, but enough where in the equatorial regions, what happens is you get more thunderstorms. Now, what happens when you get more thunderstorms? You have this huge column of air being pushed up into the upper atmosphere with a lot of moisture. When those clouds decay, you have high cirrus clouds, more high cirrus clouds, and those are what trap the heat. It's not the carbon dioxide, it's the high clouds or the water vapor. Water vapor and clouds account for close to 95% of all greenhouse activity on planet Earth. So that's how they say that global warming is caused by man, is because it increases a little bit of the convection power around the equator into these thunderstorms, which decay and allow more water vapor and clouds in the upper atmosphere, which causes the warming. Nobody disagrees with this. This is basic science. Okay, so now you have the warming in the upper atmosphere. But what about reality? Over the period of 1958 to 99, this 40-year period, we've taken a lot of balloon measurements across the world, and this is the result. Do you see any warming? No. In fact, there's even a little bit of cooling. So the models don't agree with reality. And one of the things that you realize why this is an agenda, when you start to see the reality does not agree with their hypothesis, then their hypothesis is wrong, so they're pushing it for another reason. And global warming is one of the main reasons to implement control over the global economy through cap and trade. This is the reason. It's an agenda. It has nothing to do with science. Absolutely nothing to do with science. So what you have as a comparison is reality versus the global warming models. Now the only thing that they can go on to prove global warming are these models. There is no empirical scientific evidence to suggest that man is causing global warming. Zero. If anybody tells you otherwise, they're nuts. Now there's a lot of evidence to suggest that we've had warming, melting ice caps and glaciers and so forth. But that doesn't explain how the Earth is warmed. All it does is explain the consequences. So how the Earth is warmed is very critically important. Now, what causes warming, or cooling as the case might be, is there a very close relationship between cosmic radiation coming in from exploding supernovae from light years away and the Earth's temperature and cloudiness. Whoa, that all of a sudden makes a big difference. Ooh, I'm running out of time. I would like to show you this, but we just don't have time. But it's basically a situation where the more solar activity you have, the more solar flares and so forth that occur, the more it pushes back the cosmic radiation coming into our solar system, and the warmer it gets because there's fewer clouds. The less solar activity we have allows the cosmic radiation to come in and cause more clouds, therefore cooling. Okay, we're heading into to hibernation. You haven't seen this in your newspapers or anything because they're kind of keep it quiet. And you have 400 years of sunspot activity, that's solar flares and that type of thing. Back when we had the little ice age, when the Thames River froze over every year, and the canals in Holland froze over every year, we had no solar flares. And guess what, folks? We're heading into a new period of a quiet sun. During the Little Ice Age, hundreds of thousands of people died of starvation, pestilence, and so forth because the growing season was shortened, the crops could never mature. So there was very much a lack of food during that period of time, which causes then disease and so forth. Solar cycle 25 is about 1/3 smaller than 24, which was smaller than 23. They're expecting solar cycle 26 to be almost non-existent, which means there's going to be more cosmic radiation entering the Earth's atmosphere, more clouds, and therefore cooler temperatures by a couple of degrees. It's not good news. Because of the seriousness of this, they've actually postponed the next assessment, the United Nations, the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, to 2013. It was supposed to come out this year. They delayed it. But this is what the preliminary report says. Projected changes in climate extremes under different emission scenarios generally do not strongly diverge in the coming 2 or 3 decades, but these man-made signals are relatively small compared to the natural climate variability. In other words, they're recognizing the fact that we're shifting from a warming period to a cooling period that's going to drown any signal from man-caused activities. Even the sign of the projected change in some climate extremes over this time frame are uncertain. In other words, they're acknowledging it may be negative, a cooling. This is the premier document that everybody says is the premier scientific organization. Is not, but nonetheless, I'm not going to get into that. The fact is that they're even trying to hedge their bets now to allow themselves wiggle room. Green energy, I'm out of time. I just want to point out a couple things. The EPA, becoming our high priest, has now issued what is called the boilerplate MAC regulations, just destroying our electrical generation. No coal plant is going to be able to survive this. They don't meet the specifications, so there's literally going to be as many as 800,000 jobs lost. There's going to be about 15 to 30 gigawatts of power gone. It's going to hit as much as $20 billion annually. Totally, and all of the effects of what the EPA is doing right now could affect 252 gigawatts, which is a big chunk of America's production. It's throwing us back in the dark age, literally throwing it, and there is no benefit in doing this. It does not even, they try to say that 2 or 3 people might be saved over the next 20 years if we do this, the lives of those people, but there is no justification. There's no science to suggest that that's going to happen. They're pulling the numbers out of thin air. And it's literally the EPA under the Obama administration is leveling a war against the population of the United States because our economy is absolutely dependent upon energy. And the only cheap source of energy at this point is fossil fuel. Now, fortunately, natural gas is becoming very, very abundant and very cheap. But you watch, they will try to hem in the natural gas production as well. I could go on ad nauseum about energy. By the way, that I have some Range magazines over there that I have an actual article on this issue in it if you're interested, and it's free. Okay, I'm out of time. I want to talk about biodiversity because it was really an act of God, but I don't have time, so I have to quit. Thank you very much.